Right, everyone, my name's Anthony Cummins, and I'm about to take you behind the scenes of the Shogun. This is the TV show from 2024. Now, you may or may not have seen this video before because I sent it to the Shogun to upload, and what it is an interview with the historical advisor on the show. So very quickly we're going to get to it, but he's just brought out a new book which is In Service of the Shogun, which is the story of William Adams, and it's by Frederick Kynes. There, okay? And what it is, I had a half an hour interview with him, which was recorded through the marketing department of Disney Plus and through contact with all three of us, and he's explained what went on with the show and how historically accurate he had to be to try and get it to come about. So I'm about to press play on that, so stay here. But if you're interested, get yourself a copy of Samurai Death Cult by me. That's my new book out, and there you can learn about how gruesome the samurai really were. So 2 new books for your collection. Let's go. Hi everyone, my name's Anthony Cummins. I've got a very special guest for you here, and we're going to go behind the scenes of the new TV show, The Shogun. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Anthony. My name is Frederick Kynes, and I was the historical consultant for the TV series Shogun. And I want to thank you for every week having those insightful remarks on every episode. So I always see them, and it's very nice to have people paying attention to all kinds of historical details. So thank you very much.
No problem. Where are you based now? You're in Japan at the moment?
Yes, I'm living in Japan, in Kyoto, for the last 35 years. So
Wow, 35 years.
yes, yes, I came here quite young, and I started studying Japanese history when I was in elementary school, so very early. And one of the reasons for that was because then we had also TV series Shogun,
Yeah.
and I got interested in Japanese history. And so when I went to the university in Belgium, which is my native country, I immediately wanted to study Japanese history. So, and then I came to Japan, and I never left. So,
And what do you do at the moment in Japan?
now I'm a professor in Japanese history in the International Research Center for Japanese Studies in Kyoto. And my main specialty is the end of the Sengoku period. So just the period in which Shogun plays. And very coincidentally, I've studied a lot about Tokugawa Ieyasu, about Hosokawa Igarashi, and William Adams, which are the models for the main characters in the show.
So you are probably the most perfect person to be the historical advisor on there.
Well, in a sense, yes.
Yep.
Because it's just that specialty that I had. So, and also probably because I've studied hundreds or thousands of documents at the time, mostly letters, diaries, also objects. I've also studied a lot of pictures of the time. So I got quite a sense of how the samurai behaved, what they thought, how they reacted in certain situations. And for example, before the show started, I studied, for example, how a marriage was carried out or how a funeral was carried out. And those aspects you will see later in the show also. So
Yeah, I must
I'm
tell
a happy
everyone,
man.
we are only at episode 5 at the minute. So this
Yeah.
interview is going without us seeing everything. So we're at episode 5. So let me ask you, how did you get involved? Did they approach you? How did you get involved?
Well, at the very beginning of 2021, I got an email from a Japanese producer who asked me if I could do the historical consulting for Shogun. And I was a little bit surprised at the time. I knew that there were plans for a remake, but well, it was really a lifetime opportunity.
Mm,
So I hopefully embraced it because I I wanted to get a lot of authenticity into the show. And uh, so we have period dramas in Japan, and most of them focus on the Edo period.
mm.
But the Sengoku period was very much different. And that difference I really wanted to show in the series. And I think we got that.
Well, it's one of the things I think is lacking is people's understanding of the Sengoku period and the Edo period and the changes there. And when you read the Jesuit accounts, you can really see, and then the early Edo accounts, you can see the difference is what's going on at that time.
Yes, you have a period of perpetual warfare in the Sengoku period. So it all is very very real, to say so. They have to fight to stay alive.
Mm,
While in the Edo period, you have a long period of peace. And people, warriors, they only had to do bureaucratic jobs. So they started to imagine what was life in the Sengoku period. And so they got quite a romanticized, idealized idea of what the Sengoku period looked like, and
mm.
that they put into writing. And most of those writings found their way in modern society. And so people in Japan, they look at the Sengoku period through the lens of the Edo period.
Yes.
And they also get a sort of romanticized view of what the Sengoku warriors were like.
So I want
So,
to ask you, how were you involved? Did you have to go to the set or did you do the scripts beforehand? How did you get involved? You know, how were you involved?
well, I worked 3 years with them.
3 years.
And I started when they were writing the scripts. So that was very handy because for every episode, we could have preliminary talks beforehand. So then we could have some idea of how the story had to be built. And then they gave me every time the script of every episode. So I had a lot of comments on that. And well, first of all, I really had to explain the basics of what was the time like and so on. And I must say that I worked very closely with Justin Marks, who was the showrunner, and Rachel Kondo. And normally, if I make a television program in Japan or I give a lecture or something, people would catch perhaps 30% of what I say. And the
Yeah.
rest is made from their imagination, from how they think it was. But Justin and Rachel were such good listeners. They
Yeah.
were so good that I gave them hundreds of details that they could incorporate into the show. But they also took details I didn't tell them deliberately to put into the show. I just told them the background of everything, and then they put those small details all into the show, and they incorporated in the story. I just give a small detail in one of the episodes you already have seen. Yabushige will give his sword to his kosho because you can't go into the castle with your sword, to say into the palace
Yeah.
with your sword. That was forbidden. You only could keep your short sword, the wakizashi. And so there was a reception in the palace where they could give their swords, but some samurai would prefer to give the swords to the kosho to keep them by themselves, to say so. So that was what Yabushige did, and that was what I proposed. But then Justin went one step further, and so Nagakado, Toranaga's son, he asked to also give the wakizashi because
Yes.
he doesn't trust Yabushige. So that is one aspect that came from my first basic explanation, and then they incorporated it so that it became part of the story. And you have really a lot of those kinds of details. So I'm really very satisfied with that, because normally you give 100% and people take 20-30%, but I think that Justin and Rachel, they took perhaps 90% of what I told them. So very effective way of
That
working.
that's really good actually. That scene where they take the sword, yeah, and he takes his
Yeah,
wakizashi. I loved that scene because we
thank you.
found the Edo period documents where it's like you take the katana, then you can take the wakizashi if they're going up to senior members of, maybe aristocrats or senior members. But also it says sometimes they are checked or they keep with them shinobi zashi, meaning not ninja, meaning hidden blades or something
Yeah,
hidden
yeah,
on them, because
yeah.
samurai are expected to give their swords away, and people don't realize the protocol. And we have
Yeah.
one document where it says sometimes your assistant, if you hire them in Edo, will steal your sword and they'll sell it on the market and you'll never see them again. And you have to sort of borrow a sword to get home, because this idea of the two swords with the samurai, and many people don't really understand how important this
Indeed,
is and where you
indeed.
can put your sword, how you can identify your sword afterwards.
Yeah,
So that's answered some great
yeah.
questions there, because I had I've worked on a few documentaries, not to the Shogun level, and I find that TV producers normally they just hardly listen to you. They take like
Yes,
three
yeah,
pieces of information and then
indeed.
they do anything they want. There's explosions and they love it.
Yes.
So you've had a great experience, I think.
Yes, it was a wonderful experience, and not only with Justin. So I also worked very closely with Helen for the sets,
Yep,
and I really wanted them to recreate as accurate as possible the palace in
yep,
Osaka Castle, and also Osaka Castle itself. We really based our research on how the castle looked like in 1600s, because it was rebuilt afterwards. And you see, for example, that it's white in the Edo period and now, but at that time in 1600 it was painted black. So such kinds of details we have. Then I worked with Carlos for the costumes, and in many period dramas in Japan, they use Edo period costumes for the Sengoku period,
right.
and we could manage to have really very accurate kosodes of the Sengoku period, because everything was made anew. So we had a large budget, which was handy, and Carlos made really wonderful costumes. The hairstyles, for example, I worked with Sana. The hairstyle of Ochiba no Kata, for example, I advised them to make it more the classical style, like in the Heian period, to show that she's a very high rank, and they did that beautiful. We have the special effects also with Michael. Uh, Another thing we did was with my wife, because my wife is also an historian, and
Yep.
she also worked together with me. We made a small grammar of medieval Japanese, which they could use, and they put in a lot of it, but sometimes they change it into modern Japanese.
Yeah.
But that was not really a problem for me, because mostly Japanese period dramas, especially NHK, they all speak modern Japanese, and it's quite funny when you have a period drama and they speak in the language they use now. So I really wanted to have some aspects of medieval Japanese in it.
Yep.
But if they had taken everything in it, probably modern Japanese wouldn't have been able to follow. And now I get comments this morning also from Japanese who say that they really have to listen carefully because it's quite difficult, the Japanese.
Ah.
But
So,
still,
did the
yeah.
actors have any problems then?
Well, I have to tell you that in the beginning they were very surprised and they were thinking, shall we do it in that language or shall we take modern Japanese? But in the end, they decided we go with medieval Japanese because it's just much more atmosphere you have. You feel more in medieval Japan. So I'm also very grateful to all the actors that they did a wonderful job on that. So everything was just perfect.
It sounds fantastic. My Japanese is not good enough. I caught little bits, but no, it was superb. So I've got one question, which is about the role of women. So how powerful were the women, or did the women not have power? This is one thing that a lot of people don't really understand. Basically, my question is how powerful were the women, or did the samurai have total control over everything? Did the male samurai have total control?
Well, that was one thing I really wanted to stress in the show, and Justin and Rachel, they really adopted that. That is that the women in the Sengoku period were very, very different from the women in the Edo period. In the Sengoku period, you have war, you have people dying, and if a husband dies, then his wife would take over the clan until the sons would be old enough to be in charge. Women also had more rights than in the Edo period, because in the Edo period you get a long period of peace, and so everything becomes stratified, and there is no much room to move socially. So the men become the main persons, and the women are behind in the house, to say so. And in the Sengoku period, you have much bigger roles for the women. For example, if you take the siege of Osaka, the peace negotiations between the Toyotomi and the Tokugawa were done by women. So
Really?
Acha no Tsubone was the representative of Tokugawa Ieyasu. She was his concubine, and she conducted all this peace negotiations. So you can see that they did have a much bigger role. And we also have some fighting scenes with women.
Yep.
There are not many sources of women fighting in the Sengoku period, but there are a few.
Yes.
And we know that women would also fight when necessary.
Hmm.
And they probably also had some training for that. And I also advised on the Naginata fight. So in the beginning, I think in the novel also, Mariko fights with a sword, but we changed that in Naginata, which you
Yep.
could see in the trailer. That will be later. I also really wanted them to have real battles. So
Yep.
not a woman who kills many men or something. It has to be real, and you will notice afterwards that the scenes, the battle scenes, are really accurate. So and also one thing you mentioned in episode 1, the shinobi,
Yep.
the maid. So that was also one of the ideas I gave them, because the shinobi are not what we think now what they are. They were always like they acted like normal people, like maids, like peasants, like and so on. And then they got activated. And we will have a scene with a more stereotype
Mhm.
ninja
Yeah. Well,
uh,
this is where
character,
we'll
but
explain to the audience what was superb in this, especially in episode 5, is the term kanja is used, and
yes,
the
also
term
yes,
shinobi no mono will become. So, for those in the audience, kanja and ninja in the Edo period become interchangeable. But my theory is that they probably were quite separate originally, but it's
yes,
difficult. And the scene where the spy with the pigeons, and it shows, and Tokugawa basically says, "You are a samurai. You cannot give up your life." And this is perfect because we do know the shinobi and the kanji came from a lot of them came from the samurai class, and they have to pretend to be lower class. And like you say,
indeed.
wait in the lower classes for months and then just be activated and go. So that, I'm going to tell you, Frederick, was the best example of ninja on screen there's ever been,
Thank you very
ever.
much.
And I make sure I tell people I'm not an expert in anything, but I do have one speciality, and that is shinobi. And that was, and we've been talking for a while now, haven't we? We've been talking for a while, but you have done the best scene on ninja yet. However, Frederick, we have to see the stereotypical ninja scene.
Yes,
I'm sure
yes,
there'll be problems.
yes,
However,
yes, but
the community out there, so there's the Shogun channel, Sengoku Studies, we've got Metatron. These are big YouTubers. And there's big YouTubers out there. And also the Critical Drinker, he's a big YouTuber. And I think
oh,
everybody has outright said it is amazing. It is a brilliant show. So there are almost no complaints. Only from me, just me. And they are
well,
tiny
well,
ones.
there are things that weren't adopted, so that they thought, well, for the show, it has to be there. I will give one small example. So the way they wear their swords is not period accurate. So it's Edo period style.
Yep,
Uh, in the Edo period, you have the Kannuki Zashi. So the sword is almost horizontal to the ground.
yep,
And I advised that in the Sengoku period, they had the Otoshi Zashi, which is almost vertical to the ground. So
yes.
it
They're up
changes.
here, aren't they, or down there? It's like the
Yes.
handle is up and the handle is down.
Yeah, so it changes in the Edo period.
Right.
In the Sengoku period, they were the swords in that way because Sengoku period warriors were very rough guys. And if they got into a fight, then both of them had to die. That is called Yoseibai, because if you don't put an end on that, you get vendettas.
Yes.
So even if one is wrong and the other is right, if both pull out their swords, then both will be condemned to death. So uh, uh, to prevent that from happening, they put their swords in that kind of awkward position, totally horizontal. So it's very difficult to put out a sword in that position. And that was to let show that they didn't want to fight, that they just were polite and so on. While in the Edo period, you get that romanticized idea of the samurai who always has to be ready to fight. So they put their swords in a vertical position so that they can put out the sword at any time.
Right.
And that would be, in the Sengoku period, that would be outrageous to say so. And so I really wanted them to have the swords in the Sengoku period way, but on screen it doesn't look nice. It
Yeah.
looks much more nicer if you have the vertical. So that are some things that you can say, okay, it's not really accurate, but it's done for the show. It's a show, and and you can also imagine that these guys, they want to show off, for example. So,
Oh, I
so it's
agree. I think what a lot of people, especially the internet community, don't realize is, first of all, you have to do the show. It's a TV show. So it has to
yeah,
be cool. If it's not
yeah,
cool, and if you did everything historically accurate, it just wouldn't be cool. It would be
indeed,
laborious. It
indeed.
would be boring. It's so we need the show to be good. But of course, it can't go too far that it's now not at all accurate. So I agree with you. Some things are okay, aren't they? A quick question
But
about you. How long did they use tachis for? And in my research, I often come across early Edo drawings where they're still wearing tachi in non-armor, in normal everyday dress. Do we see that?
well, in the Sengoku, end of the Sengoku period, you get more and more katana and wakizashi. So it's more of a status symbol, I think.
Yeah.
And we have some scenes with such swords, so we incorporated it, but mostly it was two swords, the katana and
Yeah.
the wakizashi.
Right.
So
We're coming.
not so much the tachi, but we have scenes with the tachi, and especially the Lord.
Yeah.
We have a lot Toranaga with his kosho carrying his tachi. So we balanced it a little bit, I think.
Right, we have to wrap up now. We've been told we have to
Okay.
wrap up the show. But I think, as a final note, I would love everybody in the samurai and ninja community to know who you are and that you are
Ah,
working there in Japan. And I have been asking Frederick for some things and help in the background. So you've been helping me with my channel. But I think we should make together the perfect late Sengoku period ninja film. Let's do it.
oh,
Me and you, let's do that. So beyond that,
yeah.
thank you very, very much. And thank you for a great series. And I hope we can do something more in the future. So thank you very, very
And,
much.
and thank you for your interest in the show and your nice comments. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for watching this video. My name is Anthony Cummins. If you want to follow me online, you can follow me on YouTube on Samurai and Ninja History with Anthony Cummins, where I'll deal with all the history of the samurai and the ninja. You can follow me on Samurai Martial Arts Real Training. This is where you'll get only the physical, you'll get only the martial arts. You can follow me on Natori Ryu, where I teach and show all the different strategies and warfare related to the Natori family. Now, outside of this, I also do some other things. So you can join me on Western Culture and Tradition, where I look at the little bits of information from the West, our folklores, our customs. You can also join me on Warduke. This is purely a fantasy channel, a little bit of fun for me in my spare time. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me again on Samurai and Ninja History. This is my basic account. And again, getting back to the fantasy, you can follow me on the Dungeon Crawl, where I'll go through everything that's eerie, dungeon synth, and all of those fantasy elements. And finally, I put some of my art on all Space Marine chapters. I do this just so I can do a little bit of art and keep up to date with the artistic world and keep my skills alive. I hope to see you there, guys, and I look forward to all of the comments on my posts and videos.